Thank you, everybody, for coming today to Grandpa Max's Siyum Shots. I'm going to refer to him as Grandpa Max because obviously he's my grandfather, but he's pretty well known to everybody as Grandpa Max. If you don't mind putting your cell phones on vibrate. There we go. Why are we here today? Why do we have this beautiful hall with the amazing catered food and everyone is here and joining in this festivity? What exactly are we here to celebrate? There's a Gemara Megillah that talks about the importance of Torah, of Torah study. And it says, it's ranking the importance of different things, and there are many days where we don't offer eulogies, certain days that are considered a holiday, but there are certain exceptions for a eulogy of a Talmid Chacham, for a Torah scholar. And the Gemara gives an insight and says that even more than learning Torah itself, but for the honor of Torah and for the honor of someone who studies Torah, for a Torah scholar, that is the highest level that you can attain. But what makes this specific, that's a regular Siyum, but what makes this specific Siyum Hashas so special that everyone is here and celebrating with us today? It's never too little, it's never too late, and it's never enough. That was a line, the hallmark of Rabbi Yisachar Franz, who's a well-known speaker, a well-known rabbi. At the Siyum Hashas, the grand Siyum Hashas, every 7.5 years, there is a huge gathering, there's a huge Siyum, where the people who do Daf Yomi, which is one page of Gemara every single day, if you do one page every single day, you finish every 7.5 years. So they make a huge Siyum. Usually it's in MetLife Stadium. And this line, Rabbi Yisachar Franz, at the 11th Siyum Hashas, this was in his keynote speech, this was his line. It's never too little, it's never too late, and it's never enough. I don't know how many of you know the whole story here, but it was 2.5 years ago at the last Siyum Hashas. It was at MetLife Stadium in the middle of the freezing winter. And we went and we asked Grandpa, you want to come with us? And it was freezing outside. And Grandpa said, yeah, I'm going to come. And he got bundled up. We have the picture with his ski goggles and his, 10 layers of winter coats. And he is sitting outside. And meanwhile, I'm like inside half the time because I'm too cold for me. But Grandpa's sitting outside the entire time. And at the end of the Siyum Hashas, he said, you know what? At the age of 87 years old, I am going to start learning Torah for the first time in probably since RJJ. At 87 years old, he decided, I'm going to start learning Gemara. It's never too late. And you know what? He could have said, okay, I'm going to learn for a week. I'm going to do a couple of, I'm going to open up a Gemara. I'll learn a couple of pages and call it a day. Very nice. But that wasn't enough. He could have said, I'll do a parak of Gemara. That would have been very nice. Finish a whole parak of Gemara. That wasn't enough. He could have said, I'm going to do an entire Masechta, a whole tractate of Gemara. That wasn't enough. He could have said, I'm going to finish entire Seder, a larger compilation of tractates. That wasn't enough. He could have said, I'm going to join Daf Yomi, I'm going to finish the entire Gemara, the entire Talmud, 1 page a day that a lot of people do, and it'll take me 7.5 years. I'll do 1 page a day. No, that wasn't enough. Instead, what he did was he said, I am going to accelerate this. I'm going to do roughly 3 pages a day. And I'm going to finish in time for my 90th birthday. And sure enough, we're standing here on my grandparents' 68th anniversary. Happy anniversary. A couple of months shy of his 90th birthday, even beat that. What do we have to do? September? Oh, right, we're in September. A month and a half. All right. Round up. And sure enough, he managed to finish the entire Shas, the entire Gemara, the entire Talmud. So why are we here today? We're here to honor the Torah. We're here to honor a Torah scholar. And we're here to honor someone who said that it's never too late and it's never enough. For our first speaker, I'd like to introduce someone who means a lot to our family, who's been in our lives for around 20 years now. He's our family Rav. He's someone who knows our family very well, knows Grandpa Max very well. It's my honor to introduce Rabbi Hirsch, the Rav of Kilas Beis Yosef, to say a few words.
Mazel Tov. This is such a beautiful simcha to Dr. and Mrs. Wasowski. We have to thank Mrs. Wasowski. Let's give her a hand also. This is an amazing thing. People learn a daf a day. Some people learn 2 daf a day. But Dr. Wasowski learned 3 daf a day. Did you see these chapa daf? 3 is better than 1. It's an amazing thing. And, a lot of people say older age is very difficult, which surely it is. But this simcha really tells us that you can turn elder age into great things. And I can't think of another event like this that I can think of, because starting to learn all of Shas at 87 and finishing at 90 is like a nace. And I think there might be a proof for this. We are coming in a few weeks to blow the shofar, and we hold lahalacha that you're not allowed to blow the shofar from a horn of a cow or a bull. Another animal that's kosher is okay, but why is a bull or a cow not acceptable? So the Gemara says, according to one Hezber Ula, that the prosecutor cannot become the defender. And if you use a cow or a bull, it will give us thoughts of the golden calf. And we did a terrible thing, the Jewish people, when we built the golden calf. But the Gemara is perplexed with that a Kohen Gadol, when he goes in on Yom Kippur, the Kodesh Kodashim, cannot wear gold because of the same principle that a prosecutor cannot become the defender. And gold also reminds us of the golden calf. And the Gemara says that this rule is only said in the Holy of Holies, in the Kodesh Kodashim. So the Gemara asks, what about the shofar? The shofar is not blown in the Holy of Holies. So the Gemara says we only say this rule when it's inside the intersanctum, and a shofar is like it's inside the Kodesh Kodashim. Because when the shofar is sounded, Hashem remembers all of our lives and judges us. And it's such a special time that it's treated like you're in the intersanctum when you hear the shofar. And therefore we apply this principle. And therefore we cannot blow the shofar from a cow or a bull, because blowing the shofar is like you're in the Holy of Holies. So this rule is only said when you're in the Holy of Holies. And shofar is an exception because it's like you're beamed up or beamed into the Holy of Holies when you hear the shofar. So we cannot blow the shofar from a cow or a bull. And there is a kasha that's asked by the Gur Aryeh, the Maharal. We know that the Parah Aduma, the red heifer's service, was performed by Eliezer, Aaron's son. And the kasha is, why not Aaron? And the answer is given because Aaron was involved in the Egel Azav. So he could not be involved in the service of the bull, the red heifer, because the red heifer and the calf are related. But that service is not in the Holy of Holies. So why are we applying the principle of the prosecutor cannot be the defender? And the answer that the Gur Aryeh gives, very powerful. And that is that if you're coming to destroy the problem, we shechted kachas ha'egel, when we shech the egel, and when we shech, and we offer the egel for the service of the Beis HaMikdash, when you destroy it, then we apply the principle of ein kategor nases anegor. And Aaron could not perform the Parah Aduma, but he could perform the service of the egel, inaugurating the dedication of the Mishkan. And therefore, because the egel was destroyed. So maybe we could suggest the principle of ein kategor nases anegor does not apply when you're destroying the negative thing. And this simcha, people get older, it's difficult. This is destroying the concept of elder age and refreshing and becoming like a new person by finishing Shas. I can't think of a greater statement than that. And it's like you are born anew, a new person. You're younger than all of us. And therefore Hashem should give you bracha v'atzlach with your Eishes Chayil. You should have good health and finish Shas many more times, the Bavli and the Yerushalmi. And in that sense, we know that we can look up to you as a friend because you're so kind. You both are Kiddush Hashem's, and we all should follow your example. And as we get older, every day we get older, we should learn more, like your grandson spoke beautifully, and do more, and take advantage of the opportunity to be in this world. Ad Mei V'Esher Mazel Tov.
Before I start, I'd like to welcome everyone here. It's a little overwhelming to see this room so full. Now, as long as everyone's here, there are a few Rabbanim that I would like to single out as being special guests. First one is Rav Schwartzberg, who you don't know it, but for the half of my life, for the last 2.5 years, was learning under you. And that's just, it's amazing. Thank you so much. Now, Rabbi Malitsky is here. He's our rabbi at home. And Rabbi Hirsch, we just heard, was as a rabbi away from home. He used to say, so it's nice to see you all. Okay, I think I'm not sure they could hear me. Okay. And of course, I'd like to welcome everyone else here, because if nobody else was here, I'd be speaking to an empty room, and that wouldn't be much fun. V'shinatem levonecha, teach them thoroughly to your children. In the Shema, twice a day, every single day, we say this. In Pirkei Avos, we are told the importance of teaching our children. At age 5, they should learn Chumash. At age 10, Mishnah. At age 15, Gemara. And not just Chinuch. For example, in the Talmud, in Kedushin, we are even instructed to teach our children to swim. So the idea of educating children is so ingrained in the Jewish psyche, it almost has the power of a commandment. So there's no question about the importance of educating children. However, one can pose this question. On an intellectual basis, is that such a great accomplishment? After all, parents, teachers, rabbis all have years of built-up experience in life in general, and specifically in teaching children. So I submit that there is a higher level of achievement, a higher madrega. That is when children teach their parents, when students teach their teacher, when talmidim teach their rabbis. That is a greater accomplishment. In our case, when Honey and I have questions or seek advice on any subject, legal, financial, religious, whatever, we ask our children and grandchildren. They are our teachers and advisors. In halakhic matters, for example, Danny is my Rebbe. That is real nachas. Which brings me to the subject of today's Siyum. In 2012, Avi started to describe this. My version is slightly different, but anyway, it's basically the same subject. In 2012, there was a Siyum Hashas in Citi Field Stadium in Queens. Danny and his kids urged me to go with them. Unfortunately, I was unable to go at that time. When the next Siyum Hashas was announced in MetLife Stadium on January 1st, 2020, Danny and the kids again insisted that I go along with them, claiming that it would be a life-changing experience. So the kids insisted that I go with them, claiming it would be a life-changing experience. And this time, I was able to go with them. Now, first, a word about the Siyum itself. The Siyum was really an amazing event. It was a marvel of organization and content. The crowd was huge, enthusiastic, and completely engaged. Now, zeroing in on a more personal level, at the end of the Siyum, the kids also urged me to begin Daf Yomi. Notice they urged me. They didn't question. They urged me to start the Daf Yomi as a continuation of the experience. So that's how I started the Daf Yomi cycle. However, when I started this cycle, I was already 87 years old, and the prospect of first beginning a 7.5-year cycle at that age seemed pretty daunting. So that I knew in order to make the program meaningful, I had to somehow compress the cycle. So instead of learning 1 daf a day for 7.5 years, I thought if I could do 3 daf a day, I could complete the cycle in only about 2.5 years, which seemed much more reasonable. Now, even though I was retired, this was still a big load to pile onto my already busy schedule. So in order to do this, I devised a method which I called chapadaf, where I chap the daf anytime during the day or night, whenever I could find or make some time. That meant writing 1 less letter, reading a few less magazine articles, doing 1 less puzzle, and utilizing the time when I'm awake during the night, since I'm a very poor sleeper. I always found gaps during the day and night to hop in a few extra dafim. Actually, to average 3 daf a day when I couldn't access the computer, I often had to learn 4 and sometimes 5 daf a day just to keep on schedule. Fortunately, this was greatly facilitated because as a novice who needed a lot of help and was not following the normal daily Daf Yomi cycle anyway, I was able to learn through an online program. Of the many programs available, I judged the Daf HaChaim program taught by Maggid Shir Rav Schwartzberg to be the best one. So that gives a background of how I got started on the Siyum and Daf Yomi experience. As I said, the whole program was billed as life-transforming. So let's see if it lived up to that promise. I'm going to tell you my story. It is a personal reflection of how this whole involvement has affected me, by giving you examples of how it impacted my life in a number of different ways. First, I'll start with the learning aspect and address the question of how much I actually learned. I started this effort with essentially no Talmud background. And in the course of the program, I do not deceive myself or anyone else into thinking that despite the outstanding and heroic efforts of Rav Schwartzberg, that by covering a lot of often very detailed material at a rate of 3 daf a day, I could really not learn really not have absorbed very much more than a small fraction of the whole Talmud, maybe a few percent. So on an absolute basis, if I only know a little bit more now than I knew before, one can question whether it was worth the better part of 2.5 years of my life for this very small gain. However, on a relative basis, although I may have only absorbed a small amount, what I did learn is still infinitely more than what I knew before. So to answer the question of whether the amount I learned represents a significant contribution to my base of knowledge, the answer is absolutely yes. Now let's continue on. The whole experience also had a profound effect in an entirely different area. That is my physical well-being. To see how, let's go back to the beginning, January 1, 2020. Danny and I and the kids went to the Siyum HaShas in MetLife Stadium, along with about 90,000 other Jews. Since there was such a big crowd, Danny parked closest to the highway, that is furthest from the stadium entrance, so we could get away faster when it was all over. So we had a long walk through all the parking lots just to get to the stadium. And then we had to climb up all the ramps to get to our seats, which are way up in the upper deck. After it was all over, again, we had to run down all the ramps, across all the acres of parking lots to get to our car. And I had no problem that day doing all this running and climbing. That was January 1st. By February and March, I was having a lot of difficulty catching my breath just walking to shul on Shabbos. First to OT, which is about 7/10 of a mile from my house, and even OE, which is only 3 blocks from my house. Now, if I had not attended the Siyum just 2 months earlier, I may have thought that this was just a sign of getting old. However, with the Siyum event as a fixed data point, I knew there was something wrong. So I went to my cardiologist, Robert Shanzer, and told him I thought that I had some clogged arteries. Initial tests did not reveal any obvious problem, but then an angiogram showed that, in fact, I had 2 fully blocked arteries. And he inserted stents to open them up. Now, that took care of the cardiac problem. But note that had I not gone to the Siyum earlier, that condition would have continued unnoticed, and I would have been at serious risk of having a heart attack. Now let's continue further, for this part of the story is not over. Robert is not just a great cardiologist, he is also a very diligent physician. In running tests as part of the angioplasty procedure, these included blood work, and he noticed some anomalies. And he suspected that there was also something else going on besides a cardiac problem. Further testing validated his suspicion and showed that, in fact, I had a fair-sized malignant tumor growing inside my colon. Fortunately, the cancer was caught early enough, and it was still well-defined and not metastasized. Although subsequent surgery was complicated because of its location, the surgeon was able to completely remove the tumor without causing too much collateral damage to the rest of my colon. And here also, I had no outward symptoms of any internal problem. So again, had I not gone to the Siyum and started down my medical treatment path, I I would not have known that I had a cancer growing inside me, and the tumor would just have kept on growing unnoticed. Continuing on, this part of the story is still not over. During this sequence of events, there was also a miraculous timing factor unfolding. Again, let's go back to the beginning, January 1, 2020. What else was brewing around that time? January, February, March of 2020. COVID, that's right, the pandemic. By March, we already had masks, social distancing, and lockdowns, including schools. Many people stopped going to school completely, including me. Remember, there were no vaccines available yet at that time. Now, if the lockdown started even only 1 or 2 months earlier, I would already have been staying home and would not have experienced the shortness of breath leading to shul, which in turn precipitated the whole sequence of medical issues in the first place. Okay, so far I've discussed the effect that the Siyum and Daf Yomi experience had first on my learning agenda and then on my physical well-being. Now I'd like to say a few words about an additional dimension. That is what the whole learning experience did for my emotional well-being. To see this, let's follow the timeline again. January 1, 2020, I went to the Siyum Shas and felt fine. By February and March, I found that I had 2 fully blocked arteries. Shortly thereafter, we also found a tumor growing inside my colon. At the same time all this was going on, there was also great anxiety about the COVID pandemic, which was exploding all over the world with particularly devastating effects on seniors like me. And also, in addition to these, I had other serious issues that I was personally struggling with at the time, although these were unrelated to the Daf Yomi program. But what is important, and the reason I'm going through all these again, is because this whole slew of problems occurred within a very short time frame, less than a year. It felt like that year was a real year of real turmoil for me. It felt like being on a ship in a storm, being buffeted from all sides, and not knowing where the next hit will come from. However, throughout this whole time, when I awoke every morning, I knew I was going to have to learn my 3 daf a day. That served like a sea anchor in the storm and was very instrumental in helping to keep me focused and on track and help me cope during a very difficult period. Now with that, I'll end my narrative here. What I'd like to do is give you now some of my thoughts and observations on what we can take away from my experience. First, I'd like to say that this Siyum and celebration are not really just for me, but for all those involved who initiated it, enabled it, and enabled it all to come to fruition. These, of course, also include Honey, the entire family, and so many of you, and ultimately Hashem, who watches over all of us. Now I'd like to summarize. I've given you an account of my involvement in this whole learning experience. We've seen that I was able to use an accelerated Daf Yomi program to complete the cycle in only 2.5 years instead of 7. That it impacted my life in many different ways. For example, in my learning habits, in my physical well-being, and in my emotional well-being. And we have also seen that an entire sequence of medical miracles was set in motion only because I went to the Siyum Hashas on that January day and had that as a base point. Very simply, if I did not go to the Siyum Hashas that day, I would not be standing here today. So when my kids insisted that I go to the Siyum and start Daf Yomi, promising that it would be a life-altering experience, I'm sure they were thinking mainly about the spiritual aspects and could not have envisioned that it could also impact so many other aspects of my life. But I can bear witness to the fact that for me, it turned out to be so much more than just a life-altering experience. In fact, it became literally a life-saving experience. And Akron Haviv, one final thought. In this talk, I basically covered my past and present involvement in this whole experience. And if one continues along this timeline, it would then point to the future. So I think it's appropriate for me to say a word about the future. And my vision of the future is to continue learning and expanding my base of knowledge. In turn would lead to the future in Yeshua Hashem, which is encompassed in a single word. And that word is L'chaim, to life. Bis 120. Thank you.
We are coming to the end of the Talmud. This is the last parak of the last Masechta, Maseches Nida. So, Zok the Gemara. Tana Devei Eliyahu, a Baraisa of the Academy of Eliyahu, teaches, Kol Ashona Halachos B'chol Yom Muftach Lo, Shehu Ben Aholam Habor. Whoever learns halachos every day is assured that he is destined for the world to come. How do we know this? Shenamar, for it is stated, Halichos Olam Lo, Halichos, that is the ways of the world, are his. However, Al Tikre Halichos, we do not read the word as Halichos, but rather Halachos, the laws of the land. Hadwan Allah Tinokes, we shall return to you Tinokes, with Sliga Law Maseches Nido, and Tractate Nido is concluded.
Great. Hadwan Allah Maseches Nido v'Talmud Bavli, V'Adroch Allah Daton Allah Maseches Nido v'Talmud Bavli, Datoch Allah Lo Nissen Shem Enoch Maseches Nido v'Talmud Bavli, Lo Sisne Shem Enoch Lo B'Omo Do'adem Lo B'Omo Do'asei. Hadwan Allah Maseches Nido v'Talmud Bavli, Adroch Allah Daton Allah Maseches Nido v'Talmud Bavli, Datoch Allah Lo Nissen Shem Enoch Maseches Nido v'Talmud Bavli, Lo Sisne Shem Enoch Lo B'Omo Do'adem Lo B'Omo Do'asei. Hadwan Allah Maseches Nido v'Talmud Bavli, Hadroch Allah Daton Allah Maseches Nido v'Talmud Bavli, Datoch Allah Lo Nissen Shem Enoch Maseches Nido v'Talmud Bavli, Lo Sisne Shem Enoch Lo B'Omo Do'adem Lo B'Omo Do'asei. He was some of Fanecha, Noy Lahino Behel Waseno, Shetei Toroso, Mono Sam Biom Hazer, Shei Imoro Rolam Habo, Hanina Ba Papa, Robi Ba Papa, Nachman Ba Papa, Achoi Ba Papa, Abamori Ba Papa, Rafon Ba Papa, Rohish Ba Papa, Surka Ba Papa, Adok Ba Papa, Doru Ba Papa. Arab no Adonai Lahino Estivre Toroso Befino. 50 also basis rail. Nia Naklu says Reinu, says Rayam basis rail, Colonel Odea Schmecho, Lom de Toraseko. Meovite to Hakmani, Miss Vaseko, Kilion Healy, Libi Somem, Bahukak Alman, Lo Eshkach, Leolam, Lo Eshkach, Bikudaka Kim, Bom, Haisoni, Bor Hator, Badanoy, Landena Hukaka, Omen, Selo Ed. Modo Manachno Fanecha, Noyan Behel was Seno, Shasamta Kanam Yoshbe based on Midrash, or Samta Kanam Yoshbe Kornos, Shaono Mashkima Behe Mashkima, Ono Mashkima with Dibre Soa, He Mashkima with Vorum Batelum, Ono Mailum Behema Mailum, Ono Mailum Kablam Socha, Behema Mailum Venom, the Kablam Socha, Ono Rotsum Behem Wotsum, Ono Rotsum Hayel Abo, Behem Wotsum Lever Shachas, Shinaba. Yota Elohim, Tovi Dame, Lever Shachas, Anshe Doma, Memo Lo Yekatsu, Yemeam Vani, Eftach Boch. He was some of Venecha, Adonai Elohai, Kishem says, Atana the Sayim, and Sekas of Talmud Babli. Kitas Venu, Haskil, Mesectos, is form, I came, the Simon, Lilmo, the Lame, the Shmal Asos, I came as called different Talmud Torah Secha, Biabo, Jospa, Tanon, Vamarum. Talmidei Chacham Yamod Li Lazari Shalot Somesh Torah Mipi Zari Zera Zari Adolom Vis Kayim Book B Vis Halecho Tanche Osor Vishokho Tishmo Olecho Kisoso Hi Tsichecho Kivi Yeru Yomecho Yosifu Lechosh Nos Chaim Or Yom Bibino Bismolo Oshevo Kovod Adonai Oslami Yitain Avor Samo Vashalom. Yiskatav Yiskadash Mirabo Yom Edu Asid Visadu Tol Lechaya Misaya Lasogo Russell Hayomo, Mibde Kata, Jerusalem, Shakola, Hekle, Begaba, Nekabo Kona, the Gorman, Oro, Lasola, Bokona, Dishmaya, Yasra, Yamali, Kucho, Rehu, Kuzavi, Ukore, Bahai, Koni, Yamakon, Bahai, the call basis rail, Bakolo was my core, Amen. Yeshme, Rabba, Ayo. Sprafis, Tavafis, Forest, Lomis, Nasavis, Adavis, Alevis, the Walsh mates, Kusha, Brehu, Ladleman, Kobikosa, Shiroso, Tishbosa, Nakamoso, Damro, Biomo, Vimo, Main. I just roll the hour Bonaval, Tamina, or call Tamide, Samide Om, or Commandos, Cambaraiso, Dibiaso, Hadim, Ibako, Masavi, Sar. Yale on Colon Shlom, Rabba, Hino, Hissa, Rockman, Heinrichen, Misoni, Vihe, for Kwame Kodam, Divishmaya, Vimo, Amen. Yeh Shalom Rabbi Mishmaya Chaim Olain Kol Yisrael V'Yom Amen. Ose Shalom B'Mavo Fu Brachom Yase Shalom Lein Kol Yisrael V'Yom
Why do you keep this from me?
But the one thing I want to, somebody asked me before about, oh, you never come to Machayev. We're talking about to be Machayev. So used to be when we had the kids at home. No, I don't go to Highland Park so frequently because, you got the kids. It's easier for them to travel than for me to travel. This. We don't have that excuse really anymore because the kids are largely out of the house. But like I said, we don't really get an opportunity to go back to the Alter Hain. And shout out to the corner table. Corner tables in the back. These are certainly everyone had a chalik there in raising me. And it's very comforting to know that, although I'll speak for my siblings as well, sure, to know that while we're not in Highland Park, that we, Grandma and Grandpa are well taken care of. So with that, I'd like to ask Rabbi Linsky to say a few words, and then followed by some semblance of dessert, and then just a couple of closing remarks, and then we will bench. So Rabbi Linsky, please.
You're invited back anytime you want to come. Just stay with us. I would like to start with a message from Rabbi Luban, who has a wedding today of a young couple who he brought closer to Judaism, and he had to be at the wedding, and I know it pains him that he can't be here to celebrate. Mazel tov, everybody. This is really incredible. After Max's speech, there's really not much more to say. I think, Max, you should quit your job, maybe a self-appointed job of being the official letter writer to every Jewish newspaper, and become a speaker. Pesach programs, I saw an ad for a Sukkot program in Cancun. I'm sure you could go and inspire everybody there. I don't know if he'll bring the grandkids. You guys don't get too excited. I think it's very appropriate that the Siyum is today. Today being opening day of the NFL, which I'm sure not everyone was so happy that the Siyum is today. And the reason for that is because of a letter that Max wrote a few years ago in one of the Jewish newspapers. Max wrote, since I'm retired with no fixed commitments, I have many lulls in my schedule, both day and night. At these times, since I'm on the computer anyways, I learn additional dapim to fill the void. I'm sure this habit can be very rewarding to others who wish to complete Shas in a shorter period of time. Chapping a daf is certainly much better than other ways of filling up one's spare time, like aimlessly watching TV, reading, playing games, and puzzles. And I think that really sums up a lot of what today is. Besides the Siyum, Max didn't keep it to himself. He inspired others at every opportunity to give chizuk and encouragement to others to follow, which is really quite incredible. Now, the Siyum is very interesting because you've been learning for 2.5 years, many dapim a day. Why is today a bigger simcha? Why is today a bigger cause for celebration? Maybe today you just did a few lines, knowing you maybe 4 pages worth of lines, but today is not any more impressive than yesterday or the day before, the last 2.5 years. Every day you learned 3 dapim or 4 dapim. So today you learned 3 dapim or 4 dapim. What's the great simcha of a Siyum? My dear friend who's here, Avi Tobias, who's a close friend of Max, shared with me an incredible idea from Reb Zev Leff. The word Siyum doesn't just mean to complete. There's a Gemara in Baba Basra. Max, you'll tell us the daf, maybe? The Gemara in Baba Basra talks about when a person is buying or selling real estate, they need to be misayim the property in the contract. They need to designate or landmark, border, frame the property. You need to know exactly what property, what's included in the sale. The language uses misayim. There's a siyum of the property. A siyum is the border, the frame. And says Rav Leff that a siyum is so much more than completing a masechta. In this a tractate, in this case a whole Bible. It frames your life. Your life, from what I understand, was a very accomplished life. I could say, after 120 years, I learned more dapim than patents that I had. Until recently, you wouldn't be able to say that. And not to minimize, but how many people could have 100 patents and learn more dapim than patents? And now the life is not just an incredibly accomplished life with the masters and the PhD and the army and patents and professional accomplishments and a beautiful family who I'm getting to know, but it's around the framework, the frame, the border of learning Torah. And that's something really incredible. Some people have that border, that frame when they're young, and the frame just sits there the rest of life and it's just there, it collects dust. But to build that framework around everything else that you and Honey have accomplished in your life is incredibly inspiring. It's a great chizuk for all of us. I wish you and Honey and the entire family great health, to have arichas yamim v'shamim, long and healthy years, to have tremendous nachas. And Rosh Hashanah is in 2 weeks, and hopefully you'll give the drasha instead of me this year, because certainly you'll be able to inspire everyone a lot more than I can. Mazel tov.
So we are absolutely thrilled that Reb Shlomi, Reb Schwartzberg, was able to come, and to my Mekutim, of course, who made the shidduch, my Mekutim, and various other Menelitzes, who were able to orchestrate the whole situation, and with that, I'll say that for years we've been trying to get Grandpa Max in some way, shape, or form to what Grandpa did was surpassed our wildest imagination, but at least to some extent. And once Dad said that this is what he wanted to do, so I knew I had to make a shidduch. And I had listened to, I had some exposure to Daf Chaim. I won't lie, 1.0 wasn't so great. Website crashed a bit. Okay, he knows. But in any case, I knew just from the time that I spent learning with Rabbi Schwartzberg, I'll say my Rebbe as well, who is sitting next to my real Rebbe, came in from Eretz Yisrael. I'll say specifically for this, maybe I'm fibbing a little bit, but certainly came to New Jersey specifically for this. So, Rebbe, thank you so much for joining us. And with that, I'd like Rabbi Schwartzberg to offer a few words to the bracha.
Thank you so much. This is really an incredible Siyum Hashas from Max Wasatsky. Actually, Max, I thought of a new pshat in the Gemara based on what you spoke. It says in the Gemara, "Kol chosh b'roisha yask b'Torah, kol chosh b'chol gufa yasik b'Torah." We see what it means when someone learns Torah. You go to the Siyum Hashas, that your whole body you have healing. Rifasi l'shorecha. Imamish is such an inspirational story of divine providence. Going to the Siyum Hashas with your heart, with the colon, everything, a real new pshat that when someone learns Torah, how it's healing for the person. Now, with all great Torah personalities, the students are always looking and being inspired by how they act. One of the well-known personalities before the war was the Alter of Slobodka. The elder of Slobodka, one of the great Torah leaders, inspired probably most of the leaders of the post-war years. He once had occasion to go to the big city, maybe Lipzig, I don't know which one it was. But one of his students came with the great Rav, and they were in their hotel room, and the Rav was looking out the window, overlooking the town square. And when a great person does something, you pay attention, especially if you're a student. And the student was looking at the Rav, and he's looking, and he asks him, he says, "Rebbe, what is it that you're looking at?" So he says, "I'm looking at a cemetery." And the student goes to the window, he's looking, he sees town square, doesn't see any cemetery. He's looking maybe in the left corner, nothing, right corner, doesn't see any cemetery. He says, "Kavod Harav, Rebbe, what do you mean? I don't see any cemetery." He says, "You see all those people teeming around in the city square? There's a cemetery. Do you know how much is buried deep inside every one of those people? It's a cemetery. This person is doing this and this person is doing that. Do they realize what potential they have inside of them? Who they are, who they can be?" Says the Rav, "I'm looking at a cemetery." Baruch Hashem, I have the great opportunity every day to call my mother. And I told her that I was asked to come to a Siyum Hashas of someone who is 90 years old, B'li Ayin Hara. And she told me, she said, she's always amazed when older people can start something new. And here, we're not only celebrating starting something new, but completing the learning of Shas. It reminds me of what my stepfather told me. Actually, one of the grandchildren is friends with my stepfather's Yisrael Senderovic. He worked in the Federal Reserve. And when they retired, and these are people, real serious, intelligent people that work really hard. And all the different people in his office, that after they retired, they were sitting around and they were complaining about, "I can't go to the green anymore. I just can't go tee off another time." And my stepfather was saying, "I don't have that problem." He says, "What do you do all day?" He says, "Look, first I get up and I pray. Then I go and I learn the Babylonian Talmud for a few hours. Then I come home, I have lunch, and I spend time with the grandkids. Then I go back again to yeshiva, and I learn the Jerusalem Talmud. And then I come home, have dinner, spend time with my wife, and I go to sleep." Says, "I don't have this problem of nothing to do." As we heard about with COVID, 3 dafim a day, the chapadaf, of the opportunity of learning. Compare your day with other people. If you would Google, you see what comes up when you Google older people. And the main word that comes up is bored. Today's time, bucket lists are big things. People have bucket lists. They want to go there. They want to do this. They want to jump out of a plane. They want to do a lot of different things. If you Google bucket list for older people, you don't want to take a look. Trust me. It'll be very, very depressing. I actually did Google it. It's very, very depressing. And after this Siyum HaShas, I want to put into my margin of my Gemara, I want to add something to a Gemara. You know, we have from the great Bach, Hagoyis HaBach, from the Hagoyis HaGra, the Vilna Gaon mixes, amendments to the Gemara. I want to add on something to my Gemara. There's a Gemara in Yuma Daf Lamed Hey Amud Beis. It talks about three great personalities in history when it comes to learning Torah. Hillel, the great leader, Rabbi Elazar ben Charsam, the great Talmudic sage, and Yosef, the biblical figure Joseph. What does the Gemara tell us? Hillel was a very poor man, very, very poor. Although he was a great Torah sage, doesn't mean you're going to have money. He made a small token that he would take half of it to pay just the guard to get into the yeshiva, and the other half he used to just put bread on the table for his family. Elazar ben Charsam was a very wealthy, fabulously wealthy person, owned many lands and ships and real estate. And he still learned Torah also. And then there was Yosef, who was tested every day, being seduced, and he also learned Torah every single day. Says the Gemara, Hillel Mechayev Esaniyim. You can't give an excuse that you don't have money, that you can't afford to learn Torah. Hillel was a pauper, and he became the great sage. Everyone knows. Who doesn't know Hillel? Rabbi Elazar ben Charsam is Mechayev Esashirim. I have money, I'm busy. This guy owned half the world. Who knows what it was? And he was walking around learning. Even his people that worked for him didn't even know. They tried arresting him because he wasn't paying. He's like, oh, let me off. And Yosef Mechayev Esashirim. Say, well, I have difficulties, I have challenges. It says Yosef was challenged, incredible, and he learned. And I want to add on to my Gemara. Max Wysocki Mechayev Esaskenim. No excuses, I'm old, I'm too old. No chas v'shalom. What an incredible achievement, 90 years old. 2.5 years. Siyum HaShas? Who ever heard of such a thing? But you know what especially is Mechayev, people? The commitment. At that age, I know I'm not going to talk about age. My elders have told me you don't talk about age. But you know what the most learned daf in Shas is? Brachas daf beis. Because people go to the Siyum HaShas and they're inspired. And then they fizzle out. You know who makes it to the end? Toiv achras davar mirishisai. Who makes it to the end? Who gets to the achras davar? Mirishisai. Only someone that has a rachis. Kol haschalas kashas, but it has to be haschala. Haschala means that there's an end and there's a beginning. And Max had a beginning because he had commitment. Who can decide they're going to learn 3 daf a day? The Chapa daf is not taking off, I'm sorry. You're not going to be the Ramesh Shapiro of Daf HaYomi. As it is, Daf HaYomi is very difficult. But Chapa daf, I'm sorry, it's going to be maybe this eclectic group. You could try, get online, try to get like Chapa daf. I don't think it'll take off because you have to be a really committed person to do Chapa daf. And you were able to do it to learn all of Shas. Now, how appropriate that we're celebrating the Siyum HaShas on the wedding anniversary with this Ezer Kenegdai. Ashrecha Zocha Nasalai Ezer. We know it's called Ezer Kenegdai. Is she a helpmate or is she opposing him? I know a lot of Kenegdais. I'm a therapist too. I do a lot of Kenegdais. Now, I was once at a rabbinic conference, and someone said, in yeshivish terminology, the way they speak, he was telling someone else, who's this guy about me? He says, he puts the yud and the hey together. I don't know if you understand, there's the ish ve'ishtoi, is a well-known, there's the yud and the man and the hey and the woman. And if you take out the yud and the hey, it's eish and eish and five. So he said, because I do shalom bayis, he said he puts the yud and the hey together. But ashrecha, that you were zeicha to such a wife, it must take a very special person to be collaborating with such a husband that's spending all that time learning Torah. I know what it takes. And I was told that this is the 68th anniversary. Something interesting. Yeah, that is a big number. I was telling my wife today, she's like, Shlomi, how old are we going to be at 68 years? Well, that's a big number, Baruch Hashem Li'ayin Har. Now, we're in the holy month of El. Do you know what the gematria, the numerical value of Elul is? Aleph is 1, Lamed is 30, Vav is 6, and Lamed is 30. That's numerical value of 67. Now, mind you, my stepfather talks about when he learns, he goes to Kailul. Now, whoever knows anything about numerical gematrias, you always add on one for the Kailul. So here we have 67 years of marriage with the Kailul is 68. That's in this holy month of El. And you know what the acronym of El is? Ani l'doidi v'doidi li. I am to my beloved, and my beloved is to me. What a beautiful thing to celebrate a wedding anniversary of 68 of Ani l'doidi v'doidi li. What a two-way beloved relationship. And we just had in the daf, actually, talking about the daf, the immortal words of Rabbi Kiva saying, Shali v'shalochem shalohi. What is mine and what is yours, all my students, is shalohi, is my wife. And I know that 1,000,000% that my wife also, she gets all the credit. Because you know why? We husbands pick up the nonverbal cues. Oh, if she wasn't happy with this would not have gone anywhere past first base. So Mazel Tov Rebbetzin, I don't know what the next project is going to be, if it's going to be Yerushalmi. By the way, if you're following me, I also give a shir on Rambam, and the Tais is a lot more if you're following me that you're going to have to do. Now, there's another acronym for El. That's the Oisius Aleph Lamed Vav Lamed is Es Levavcha, the Es Levav Zarecha, which is that our hearts are very intimately connected to the hearts of our children. And I heard that this is how this Siyum Hashas started. The grandson or the son coming and saying, you know, it's funny, that's how I started actually also learning Daf. I mean, I went through the yeshiva system. We didn't really learn this way. And I was at the Siyum Hashas, and I told my brother-in-law, I goes like, you know, I only came because I was making my father-in-law happy to go to the Siyum Hashas. You know, I don't do events. This was a very special event, so I came here. But so I said, no, you learn, you'll finish by when you're whatever. He was 12 years old. He said, I'm in yeshiva, I can't. How about you? I said, how about me? I'm very busy. I was very busy. I was doing a lot of things, chafruses and teaching and whatever, and learning full-time in yeshiva. I was like, okay, look, we're here anyways. Let's learn Daf Beis. And like we said, the Chapadaf, you fill in like the famous professor with the stones, and then you put in the sand, and then you put in the water. You'll be surprised how much can fill in. That's the same thing. You know, don't underestimate the power of your words, that someone's going to tell you, no, let's go to the Siyum Hashas, and look what happened. Like I think it's the Kotzk who says, what's alav? Why is the words on your heart? It's in the heart. You say something, someone is going to hear it. It might be on the heart for a while. We were supposed to go to the previous Siyum Hashas. And then it was the last Siyum Hashas. But it's going to take time. It's going to happen. Similarly, the dream that was Daf HaChaim, you see how far-reaching our words can go. This is like we learned past 2.5 years, 2,711 dafim together. You don't realize you say one word and it's all over the world. It's something, it's appreciation. Obviously, thank Chesky Kafta and Chaim Shmuel Friedman for these chus of something called Daf HaChaim. You know, Max, this is what a way to live your golden years. You know, it's a quantum upgrade in your life, like we heard, physically, spiritually, emotionally. This is a mitzvah lefarsim. It's a mitzvah to publicize this Siyum Hashas. So I want to end with a novel interpretation I was thinking of just now when I was driving up in the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos in the 4th parak. Rabbi Yosef Yehuda Ish Kfar Habavli, he says, if you learn from young people, what is that compared to? Seem like tart grapes. They're not really fully matured. And you're drinking wine from freshly squeezed grapes. Not so Gishman. If you're learning from the elders, what is that compared to? It's eating fully ripened grapes. Is drinking aged wine. The Mishnah ends off with a well-known teaching. Rebbe Eimer, he says, don't look at the flask. What's inside the flask. You have a fresh, new flask, but Mali Yashin can be filled with aged wine. The Yashin, you have an aged flask, that there's not even new wine inside of it. So I was wondering, regarding this Mishnah, why doesn't it say, you would think it's saying that a new flask with old wine, and an old flask with new wine? Why does it say even that it's not even new? Why doesn't it say, but it has new? You know, you never know what's inside of it. So I was thinking that I think the new Torah of the old is also high quality. You're not going to say that you have an old flask with new wine as if it's not something that's good. Because Hakol Hoilach Achra Achisam. The most inspiring personal Siyum I was ever at is this one. We're truly loimim and hazikenim, learning from the elders what it means to look deep inside yourself and to actualize what in Yiddishkeit, in Judaism, is called the Everest. The Everest of Yiddishkeit is learning Shas. That was always everyone's greatest ambition. There's nothing bigger than saying, I finished Shas. Here we are, 2.5 years later. Someone in whatever decade it is that they're at, finishing all 2,711 pages of the Babylonian Talmud. I want to thank you for inviting me. This is very, truly a humbling experience. And just as this Siyum was L'Taiva, so to everyone here should have a Chasima L'Taiva, a good Kabench Yar. I want you to know, Max, once you're here, there's no turning back. You know, I don't know if you remember from the end of the first Masechta, Brachas, the Gemara ends off saying that when people learn Torah, Ein Lehem Menucha. And I heard you don't sleep so well, but there's no Menucha because they go Michayel, El Chayil, continue to steig in your learning and your ruchnias and your gashmias to be healthy. Mazel tov. Enjoy the best days of your life.
The one person who did speak today is extremely near and dear to all of us, and I'm going to get to that in a second. But first, as long as I'm up here and I have your undivided attention, just a couple of shout outs. Most of whom you've already heard, of course. All the Rabbanim that were here, my Rebbe as well. I think I mentioned as well Eliezer for helping, and a couple of things that were not mentioned. Of course, we mentioned the boys encouraging Grandpa in his accomplishments, but the one thing is kind of the Gashmias here. And the Gashmias here would not have been possible or happened without our, we say Biblish is built. So Baruch Hashem, as far as the girl department goes, with one exception of baby Ricky, we choose the Bai version. So the daughters-in-law, and specifically for all the centerpieces, Abigail, who's going to yell at me for saying literally every single detail, Abigail is her mother's daughter, and every single detail of exactly how the room should look. Okay, we spent a fair amount of time, Baruch Hashem, everything came out wonderful. So Abigail, thank you for the invitations and for all the arrangements and everything else. Fabulous. And of course, to Rachel as well, you know, involved. Everybody was involved in terms of menu, food, everything, etc. So thank you all for that. Of course, I want to thank, as my father did, everybody for coming. And Grandpa does not know the following. Where's Dad? Okay, so we have the following. As I said, if he were here, not yet. If he were here, not yet. Oh, Lisa. To you, happy anniversary to. Sorry. Happy anniversary, Grandma and Grandpa. Happy anniversary to you. 68 years. So that Grandpa did know about. What Grandpa did not know about is the following speaker, very short, but I will read it to you, and of course you'll understand where it's from. Dearest Max, Shira and I stand in awe of your incredible accomplishment and are celebrating with you today from Eretz Israel, which is so dear to you. At a stage in life when it is so natural to sit back and enjoy your nachas, children, grandchildren, you chose the journey of Rabbi Akiva. It was just a few short years ago when we met at MetLife Stadium as you sat with Danny and his boys and was so overwhelmed and deeply inspired with this worldwide Siyum Hashas that with the encouragement of your grandsons, you took upon yourself a new life's challenge, not to be a spectator, but rather to become an active participant in the learning and the completion of your very own Siyum Hashas. Your unwavering commitment to complete 3 blot of Gemara a day, and day in and day out, is an inspiration to all who know you and to all aspiring Talmidei Chachamim. The Mishnah in Pirkei Avos speaks of different crowns that an individual can acquire in his lifetime. Today, you are crowned with a Keter Torah that you have earned through your labor of love of Hashem's Torah. My dear Max, while this is your Kinyan HaTorah, the impact of your accomplishment will set a gold standard to encourage others. The letter Gimel, Mem, Resh, Aleph, and Gemara stand for the ministering angels, Gabriel, Michael, Raphael, and Uriel, who today gather around you as they crown you with that Keter Torah. May those Malachei Elyon ministering angels continue to accompany you and Honey in future smachot and achievements for many happy and healthy years to come. Mazel tov.